The Ottomans, with their advanced New Age armor, superior artillery, and handheld firearms, would have been an insurmountable obstacle to any army of the ancient era, no matter who would have commanded it, Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, or the Carthaginian Hannibal. Therefore, we will deliberately equalize our opponents. Let them be approximately equal, including the number of troops, on each side of about 30,000. On one side will be Rome of the imperial era, namely the beginning of the 2nd century, when it reached the highest power and maximum territorial expansion. And on the other would be the Ottomans of the early 15th century, when their army did not yet rely on the use of gunpowder. In order to avoid an advantage that could play in someone's favor, we will assume that the opponents met in one of the Balkan valleys, spacious enough for military operations. It has a moderate climate and flat terrain, and the armies are well rested before the battle. Each of the commanders equally experienced and not once conducted battles in completely different theaters of war. The Quirite legionaries are commanded by the invincible Emperor Trajan, while the Muslim army is commanded by Bayezid. At the end of his life, this sultan will suffer a crushing defeat from Tamerlane, but now we do not know it, and we cannot know. In that case, who will win? The Romans have the training and cohesion of their legions. Never before have the Ottomans faced an infantry army of such quality. The Europeans will achieve this only in 200 years, when they pass through the era of the Italian and religious wars. The number of throwing machines in their army is capable of surprising any opponent. The infantry has throwing spears and large shields. In favor of the Ottomans plays the difference in the level of technology, in which they are ahead of the Romans by more than a millennium. Their light cavalry has chainmail, heavy cavalry prefers lamellar or grainy armor, in close combat goes with long sabers, which became possible to make because of progress in metallurgy, and most importantly, uses a stirrup. Turkish infantry at that time was not so great in its numbers, but they are heavily armed warriors with bladed weapons, or archers. This is the real elite, designed for storming castles, the very well-known janissaries. The Turks are obviously superior to the enemy in the quantity and quality of cavalry. I think that they will send it forward. At first they will be light Akinci archers, who at this stage do not need to engage in close combat. They will soon discover that Roman bows hit worse and at a shorter distance, and that pilum throws do not reach the Turks at all. Small in number and worse-armed Roman cavalry will not be able to catch up with them without the prospect of their own rapid destruction. And then Emperor Trajan will be forced to move forward all his troops. It is foolish to tolerate the enemy shelling. It is necessary to achieve victory face to face. The janissaries are predominantly foot archers, and according to Turkish tradition, the approaches to their positions are sufficiently fortified. There will be dense rows of sharply sharpened stakes, and on the edges they will be covered by Ottoman halberdiers who know how to use their weapons. Although there was nothing like this in the ancient world, it is likely that in this part of the battle, the Romans will still prevail. It is too significant their advantage in manpower, but inevitably will suffer losses, which will be very large. And at this point, Sultan Bayezid will throw on the table his main trump card, Sipahov. The Roman legions have always had one but very significant disadvantage. They did not fight very well against heavy cavalry. But in the ancient world, up until now, few of their opponents had the opportunity to test this. The Turks no doubt could. Heavy cavalrymen with stirrups, protected many times better than their enemies, will sweep away the Roman infantry, which was drawn into close combat. Against such an army in the ancient world, no one could respond with anything, and will complete the matter light Akinji, which will go around from the rear and surround their slow-moving enemy. A viewer familiar with the history of warfare will notice that we have played up the Ottoman army a bit by taking early imperial Rome for comparison, whereas the military forces of the later empire were significantly reformed to counter the Sassanids. Those had an army similar in structure to the Turks, some elite infantry, many mounted archers, and heavy cavalry. The Romans responded by replacing gladii with longer spatha swords, introducing a lighter oval shield instead of the famous rectangular scutum, replacing pilum throwing spears with long-range plumbati darts, forming units of specialized lanciarii piercers, as well as their own shooting cavalry and cataphractarii. But, it seems to me, this would not have been enough to overcome the Ottoman technological and tactical advantage.